member of the group here, and I'm trying to remember not to stand in front of the slides here. We're going to start out today talking about what's now called the project description. And again, the more common name that most of us use to describe this piece of grant is the abstract. And of course, every grant has an abstract, and this is a crucial piece of a grant. And when I talk about the abstract, this is also a logical time to say a few words about writing style. So let's begin. There we go. I'm sorry. So you're going to have to bear with me. The feeder thing is moving this morning. So project description. The thing about the abstract, I'm going to, from here on out, call it the abstract. As I said, the NIH name now is project description. But we're talking about an abstract. And the thing about the abstract that you really, really want to remember is that, remember yesterday we were saying that the title is the very first piece of the application that all of us see. Well, right after we look at the title, the thing we're looking at is the abstract. And I think we all know that expression that you never have another chance to make a good first impression, right? So it's the thing that all of our parents say to us that we all remember. It's true in real life, and it's true of your grant. This is the first impression of your grant, and it's even more important than that. Because based on the abstract, remember yesterday we were talking about how this grant that you write ends up being assigned to a given study section. They're going to look at the title, the abstract, and perhaps the specific aims. So this is just a crucial piece of a grant. It's the only piece that you can really be guaranteed that every reviewer is going to read. And then if the pressure isn't enough with all that, the reality, I think, of the review world is that when the reviewers are sitting around and reviewing the grant, very often they'll look at the abstract one more time during the review. So you're reading it, you're rereading it. Know now that your reviewers are rereading this right at the time that they're discussing your grant. That's a big heads up to all of us that when we write this piece of the grant, it's got to be crystal clear. Because people are in a meeting, just as we're in a meeting now, and they're listening and reading. So this thing has to be instantly comprehensible. So the other thing you want to know about the abstract is, remember that yesterday we were talking about the CRISP database that all of you can use to find out who's doing what grants have been funded in your area, and we said it's just a great tool to use. Well, you know, if your grant gets funded by any federal funding agency, so obviously including the NIH first of all, guess what? Your abstract goes on to CRISP, and it will be there for the next 25 years. So very long shelf life. So this abstract is going to be there for all your colleagues to read, and it's going to be there for all your competitors to read. Be careful with proprietary information, right? Make this thing count. So we're going to go back just as we did with the aims and talk about the NIH directions. The NIH directions state that this should be a succinct and accurate description of your proposed research. And if we're trying to translate that into how many lines of text, there's a new form, an electronic form that you'll see in the NIH application. And if you sit there and count out how many lines that you have, if you just do a prototype abstract, it comes out to 30 lines of text that you're dealing with during the time. The directions say they want our broad long-term objectives, our specific aims, a description of health relatedness, and a brief description of research design and methods. Oh, and when you look at that, the first thing that's obvious to us when we see it as broad objectives, specific aims, it's exactly what they asked us for in the specific aims, right? So a very reasonable question is, what's the difference here? And the fact that there's so much duplication between these two pieces often means that people understandably get very confused as to what do I put in one and what do I put in the other. So let's talk about that. Before we turn to that point, I took this right from the NIH directions. The directions state, and I really want to emphasize, this section should be informative to other people working in the same or related fields and insofar as possible, understandable to a scientifically or technically literate reader. What do they mean by that? Simply put, the abstract, just like the specific aims, should be written in the style of Scientific American. I would not make it more technical than that. So don't just write for the experts in your field, write for other scientists, and I'll show you why that's so important in a little bit. There's a new requirement from the NIH called the Public Health Relevance Statement. They ask for 2 to 3 sentences, and here it's a different instruction, if you will. The language they state that they want you to use is plain language that can be understood by a general lay audience, just for that public health statement. This is crucial, and I wanted to give you an example so you see how to write this. The reason why I'm giving you an example, this is a relatively new requirement, so even if you go into the CRISP database, you won't find many examples of a public health relevance statement simply because it's a new requirement, so not many grants have been funded that include this. So this is what a public health relevance statement would look like. And again, I pretended that I had written that, the grant that I'm using for my example, I pretended that I was writing it for now, to submit now with this new requirement. This is literally the language I would use. The underrepresentation of minority biomedical researchers has significant implications for the nation's public health. For example, it may play a role in the relative lack of research conducted into disparities in health outcomes. The NIH has mandated disparities in health outcomes as a major public health issue in its recent report, Roadmap to the 21st Century. So again, very simple, clear, plain language, comprehensible to any lay audience, just for the public health relevance statement. Use this as an example, so I hope it'll be helpful to you. So, one of the hardest things to do is to write the abstract because of all the pressure attached to writing a good abstract. So I wanted to give you 2 examples for how to begin. You can begin with the research problem, and when I say begin with the research problem, I want to show you what I mean by that. Look at the first example. I start out, again, I made this up, the science is just made up, so I'm sure scientifically very inaccurate. I begin with my problem. Mammography is the most effective technology for screening breast cancer. However, it fails to detect approximately 15% of early stage breast cancer when the disease is most curable. We propose to improve detection of early stage breast cancer by developing a new contra-based algorithm for detecting microcalcification clusters, the earliest index of breast cancer. Why am I showing you this example? When I say start with the problem I started with is mammography, the gold standard for detecting breast cancer. I did not start out by saying a major problem is breast cancer, which kills X number of American women per year. Why didn't I start that way? Isn't that more compelling to start by saying how many women die of breast cancer each year in the United States? Why didn't I start there? Do you know that grab the reviewer's attention? Isn't that more significant? Because I didn't. I started with mammography. Mammography, here's the problem. There are problems with our gold standard means of detecting breast cancer. Here's what we propose to do about the problem. I didn't start with breast cancer. Any ideas why not?
Because you're not proposing to cure breast cancer.
I'm not proposing to cure it, right? So is one of the most common things to do, and it's very understandable. We're trying to get our reviewers to buy into significance, and it's going to be very tempting for all of you, as it is for everyone. When you write a grant, you always want to start by saying, breast cancer, it's a terrible illness. Prostate cancer, it's a terrible illness. Whatever it is that you're looking at, AIDS, diabetes, don't do that. It's a very weak beginning. First of all, any grant about breast cancer, by definition, if it's going to the NIH, it's going to go to the National Cancer Institute, right? And everyone at the National Cancer Institute knows how many women die of breast cancer. So start with what's the problem that you propose to work on, much as you're suggesting. I'm not proposing to cure breast cancer. I'm proposing to improve mammography. Here's the problem. Here's how I propose to improve it. Do that with every grant you write. It's a great way to begin an abstract. It really is.